What's up guys, Jay here and welcome back to another tier list video. Today we're going to be doing the tried and true most standard list covering the 8 mission types in Deep Rock Galactic. I'm sure a lot of people are going to love my placement on some of these missions and everyone's going to be super nice after this video, right?
Nope.
So I'm going to go through this and give my take on all these mission types and rate them on my own accord. And just how exactly am I going to be rating them? Well, first I'm going to rate them on their entertainment factor. So like how fun they are, how enjoyable they are to go through. Are they just generally a good time to go through? Class usefulness. So basically, does every single class provide something during these particular missions? Do they all do something that is very useful? Do they all do something that is important? Do they all have a place essentially? And the level of complexity. Basically, is it complex but still fun to go through? Is it not too difficult without sacrificing fun? Is basically what I'm trying to go for with that. And also, I'm going to be doing this from the perspective of a casual-ish player. So I know a lot of these missions may be fun until you do them on hazard level 5 and then they become a big pain. But I'm going to be talking more in terms of general play instead of like that high level, high octane play. So just keep that in mind going forward with this. And lastly, again, I just want to reiterate that this is all just purely based off of my opinion and conjecture. Just because I put something in a particular tier placement or position does not mean that that's what it's supposed to be, or it doesn't mean that's what it is for all people. So just keep that in mind going forward. So if you guys are ready, let's get started with this tier listing. Also, if you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more things like it, be sure to like and subscribe, that way you never miss another upload. The first up on the list is egg hunt missions. So egg hunt missions they're kind of interesting. These are the missions where you obviously have to collect a certain number of alien eggs and deposit them into Molly, all that kind of stuff. This is a mission that has Molly with you. In terms of entertainment value, I do kind of enjoy this one a good amount because it's not super stressful. It's kind of on the same lines as a mining expedition, which we'll talk about that a little bit. It's very, very straightforward, very streamlined. You just kind of have to collect stuff. In terms of entertainment value, I do think that it is relatively fun because it gives you a good amount of swarms, because I think every time you pick up a egg, there is a chance that a swarm can spawn up to a certain point, and that kind of keeps the combat kind of fresh. Makes it so that way there's not a whole lot of downtime, which is very nice. In terms of class usefulness, I think that all of the classes have a decent amount of play here. The scout obviously is probably the best suited because a lot of the times the eggs are just in hard to reach positions in the very, very top. So the scout allied with an engineer can be very good. So of course you can use the dynamic duo of the scout and engineer combo to really help you out with that. The gunner as well can do really well with the swarms. He can provide safe travel with his zip line, and the driller can easily get to any of the eggs that are on the ground or mid-level using his drills and his satchel charges. So the egg hunts are in a pretty good spot. I would say they're in a solid B tier, like high B tier, maybe almost A tier. Yeah, I never really have a bad time going through egg hunts. They're not too bad, provided that everyone is doing their job properly. This is a type of mission where if somebody's not doing their job right, it can be a little bit annoying because, like I said, the eggs can be literally in the ceiling. So if your scout and engineer are not working together, that can be a big problem. So you want to kind of keep that in mind. But overall, not too bad. Solid B tier, I think. And yeah, we'll go from there. Moving over to elimination missions. So this is an interesting one. So this is the mission type where you fight the dreadnoughts, the big boss bugs that you can come up against. And this one, it's kind of hard to say because it really depends on what dreadnoughts you get in terms of the ones that spawn, because you can't get the same dreadnought 2 times in a row. So if you get the Hive Guard, which is my personal least favorite, you can't get the Hive Guard again immediately after. Now, if you're in a mission where you have to fight 3 of them, you can get the Hive Guard and then say a regular dreadnought and then the Hive Guard again. It is possible to do that, although it is not quite as common. This mission kind of really depends on the dreadnoughts that you get in terms of how easy or how hard it is. If you get the twins and then the dreadnought and then the twins again, in my opinion, that's really, really easy. That's not too bad because the twins are, at least in my opinion, the easiest ones to take out. In terms of entertainment value, I'd say it's okay. I think the dreadnought bosses have definitely shown their age in terms of how fun they are to fight. I think that they can be a little bit redundant to fight because many of the times it's just the same case of you fight them, damage them to a certain point, and then they become invulnerable. Then you have to wait and then repeat the process over and over and over again. I would like things that have a little bit more intrigue and nuance to them. Overall, fighting them is not too bad. In terms of classes, this is a type of mission where really any class can be useful because it's pretty much just damage. The gunner excels very well at this. The Scout excels at very well at this. All the classes really have a place that they can work with. In terms of complexity, it's not really complex. It's very straightforward. You just got to fight the bosses. I think I'm gonna probably also put this maybe like high C tier, just because the bosses in general, again, they feel kind of old, they feel very aged, and I feel like they kind of need to update them a little bit, or maybe give us some more Dreadnought variants to fight up against. So that's where we're going to put that one for now. So now we're going over to the Escort Duty mission. So this is the one where you have to protect Doretta, i.e. the drill dozer, as it goes towards the Armor and Heartstone. You have to refuel it every few minutes depending on how long the mission is, and then you have to defend it when it gets to the Heartstone while it cracks it open, and then you deposit it for extraction. This, in my opinion, is one of the higher, more fun ones to go through. In terms of entertainment value, I really do enjoy it. I think that the thematics and the style that this mission is in is a lot of fun. I like the idea of escorting this massive piece of machinery. It really puts everything into scale and very well, and I do like that a lot. And it also helps keep the pace going, because there are certain times where you're defending, and then there are certain times where you're moving, and it kind of gives you those chances to catch your breath whenever it runs out of gas and you have to refuel it using the oil shale. It's just very good at pacing the combat, and depending on how hectic the mission is in terms of extra objectives like machine events, tyrant weeds, meteors, it can be interesting to do all that while managing and keeping track of Doretta's health. Overall, I would say this is definitely a high ranked one. This is definitely an A tier for me, because I always have a blast going through these. These can take a while to get through depending on A, what else happens in the mission, B, the mission length itself, and C, just how your team is coordinated. That would probably be the only thing that would keep it out of S tier. Overall, I do definitely really enjoy this. Especially, you always have to make sure that you get Doretta's head afterwards. You cannot forget that. In terms of class effectiveness with escort duty missions, this is definitely a type of mission that everyone can be very useful for. In terms of running around, getting everything, the scout can be very useful at getting the oil shale. The engineer can help the scout get the oil shale. It's very, very good. In terms of the final defense section with the Armor and Heartstone itself, the driller can destroy the crystals very easily, so can the gunner if he shoots the tops of them. Pretty much everybody has to work together in some way, shape, or form to complete the mission, which is very, very good, and they all have a way that they can utilize their abilities as best they can. The scout lighting up the ending room is very useful, or pretty much any room that they're in getting the oil shale. The driller finding the oil shale, digging it out, that kind of stuff. It's all extremely, extremely useful. So in terms of that factor, it's very, very good. But overall, it's a fantastic mission type, and I never am opposed to doing an escort mission no matter what. So next we go to the very standard, very basic mining expedition. So this is the standard default, as I like to say, for mission types, because this is the very first one you go through. This is the one you go through in the tutorial mission, albeit a much smaller, more dumbed down version. And all your objective is in this mission is to collect a certain amount of Morkite, which is a unique resource that spawns in this particular mission type. You just collect a certain amount of it, which you find as you progress through the caves, you deposit it, and then you leave. In terms of entertainment value, it's fine, because it's very basic. You don't have to really think too much about it. You just progress through the cave and try to find the Morkite, and that's really all you're trying to do. In terms of class position, I would say every class has some form of a way to apply themselves to this particular mission. In terms of the scout and engineer combo, obviously you can get Morkite that's up in the ceiling, so you can use those two to get it. The driller can carve a path through the tunnels, can use the EPC or the satchel charges to get the Morkite, and the gunner can just control the enemies as they're attacking, or use the zip line to get across. This is a very basic standard mission, so there's not a whole lot of intricate strategies that are involved with it. A lot of it comes down to how the cave is laid out, which that can be it can make things easy or hard depending on how the cave is laid out. But for the most part, it's not really that bad to go into. So I would say personally, I'm going to put this also in the B tier, and I would probably put it in the high B tier actually, because I do think this is a little bit more fun to go through than an egg hunt mission. So that's where we're going to put it for now. Moving on to point extraction missions. So point extraction missions are the ones where you have to collect the acquired gems, the big blue glowing crystals, and then you have to bring them back to the central mine head, deposit them, and once you get all of them, you're able to go. This one, I kind of have like a love-hate relationship with this one, because it's I don't know. There's something about it where I've never really been too big on point extraction missions. Whenever I go through them, I always have this feeling in the back of my mind like, oh, we really have to do a point extraction mission. I really don't know what it is, if I'm going to be honest with you, because it's not that the mission type is bad. I don't know why. It's just there's this stigma about this particular mission type that for some reason I do not like. In terms of entertainment, it's really not that bad because the combat in this particular mission type is never really gone. The waves of enemies are constantly coming after you, so you don't really have to worry too much about not having a fight. And depending on where the gems are located, it can kind of force you to explore the map. And in mission types like these, I tend to find a lot of collectibles, cosmetic collectibles, machine events, just because you kind of have to go around the map to find all the aquatic gems, which in essence is a pretty good thing, I guess. In terms of class usefulness, it's kind of hard to say. I would say to an extent, yes, all the classes can be very useful in this particular mission type. The scout, especially on this, because the aquatic gems, similar to the eggs and egg hunt missions, these things can be just in the ceiling in very difficult locations to find. So the scout and engineer are both very, very good on this. The gunner, not necessarily as much as I would like. Again, it kind of depends on the way the map is laid out, but for the most part, the gunner's main contribution is, again, swarm control, because enemies are constantly coming at you, which is a good thing. But then his zipline doesn't necessarily have as much value as it could unless the map is laid out in a certain way. His zipline can be very useful for traversing large areas of the map, especially if it's like a very wide map, if you're on like Sandblasted or something like that, where the map corridors are just huge. So that definitely can be useful. I just feel like there's something holding him back a decent amount. And the driller, unless the aquatic gems are in the ground, he can't really do a whole lot aside from just digging up the walls, which can work, don't get me wrong, but it's a very indirect way when you could just have a scout go up there and grab it, essentially. So I don't know what it is about point extraction missions. I really don't understand what it is, but whenever I play them, I just have this gnawing feeling in the back of my head, like I don't want to go through this. I don't know what it is. I do not know what it is. So I'm probably gonna put these, let's say these are gonna be D tier, but really the reasons are unknown to me. I have this strange just blah attitude towards point extraction missions, and I really do not know why. I wish I could explain it more than that, but just for some reason, I've just never really been too big on these particular mission types. So moving on to the on-site refining missions. Now, this is probably my second favorite type of mission in the game currently right now. And I know that's probably going to be very surprising to a lot of people, but to me, on-site refinings are a lot of fun to go through because in terms of enjoyment factor, I really love the theme, the idea, and just the premise of this mission type. The fact that you're setting up this oil pumping rig, essentially collecting all these resources on a mass scale. To me, just it feels good. It makes me feel like I'm part of a big operation. I don't know why that makes me feel good. It just does. And in terms of class effectiveness, I would be remiss to say the driller is of course the MVP on these particular mission types, because he can just cut a line to every one of the individual pump jacks as directly as he possibly can, and it just makes the whole mission so much easier. Everybody else does have their place in a way. Probably the scout doesn't have a whole lot of use in these particular mission types, except for pretty much just lighting up the area, because when it comes to laying down the pipelines, he doesn't really have anything that helps out to a good extent. The gunner as well to a certain extent, but the gunner has the advantage of having much better bug control, which you're going to need, especially once the pumping starts to happen. So that's where I would say is the only real drawback. But overall, this mission type is insanely fun. It's complex. It is relatively complex, but I still think it's very fun. I know a lot of people would not like this particular mission type because it takes a long time to set up and all that, but I really enjoy that kind of industrial feel to it. So this is going to go high A tier for me. In my personal opinion, this is a fun mission type to go through. I'm never opposed to this. Always make sure you have at least one driller on your team, because it's going to make this go so much smoother. Overall, high A tier, almost S tier, but just because it's not universal for all the classes, that's the only real thing I would say. Next up, we have Industrial Sabotage. Now, this is where I might be making a lot of friends or a lot of enemies, but Industrial Sabotage, to me, is S tier. Personally, I love going through industrial sabotage missions. I think that these mission types compile the best parts of all the other types of missions and puts them into one. So this is the mission type where you have to break into the data vault of a rival tech company. And in order to do that, you have to find the 2 power stations, disable them, and then you have to remove the external batteries and then fight the caretaker at the very end to recover the data. In terms of entertainment, I really enjoy it because there's a lot of steps to this mission and every single one of them is different enough to make it feel enjoyable. You have to find the power stations, which is exploration, which perfectly fine. And it's not that hard to find them because you just have to follow the cables. You just have to keep in mind where they're going. So you have exploration with a sense of purpose as well. You have to find the power stations, call in the hacking pod, and line up the transmitter nodes so that way you can hack into it, which that requires a little bit of finesse in order to get them to line up properly. You have to either clear out terrain, make terrain yourself, whatever it is. Then you have to defend the hacking pod, which is just a simple defensive situation, which is a lot of fun because it allows for more combat, which up until this point in the mission, there's not a whole lot of combat unless you get a random swarm. Then once you do that 2 times, you go back to the central area, you open up the caretaker, and then you fight it, which is a huge boss battle, which makes the boss battles in the elimination missions look, it's not even comparable, at least in my personal opinion. The caretaker is such a well-designed boss fight, in my opinion, because it's technical, you have to know what you're doing, it's multi-phased, and as the fight progresses, you feel as though the caretaker is ramping up its difficulty, it's ramping up its security measures, and you get this sense of like, this thing is becoming more and more powerful as I'm fighting it. Which to me, that feels really, really good when you do eventually beat it. And then at the end, when it does that big explosion, it just feels so satisfying to get through. In terms of classes, all of the classes can shine in this mission type to every extent. The engineer and scout can do their normal thing, but the engineer can also help to set up the transmitter nodes by setting platforms down that you can place them. He also does very, very well in the final encounter with the sentry guns. The driller is in a similar situation where he can set up perfect lines for the transmitter nodes. That way they go straight to the power station and make that situation so much easier. He can even set up bunkers to protect the hacking pod in, which is very, very nice. The gunner is just in his element in terms of swarm killing as well as good damage to the caretaker itself when it happens. And the scout is very useful at keeping the whole area lit up and at also hitting the weak points on the caretaker when it is time, because he can quickly zip around to whatever eye is open, which is very, very good. So all the classes get to use their full kits in this particular mission type, which I really enjoy. And then in terms of complexity, it is very complex. It's a very big multi-step process, but I think the complexity in this one leads to it being more fun. And that's why I put it where it is. So overall, Industrial Sabotage is an S tier mission type, and I love going through it every single time, but it is long. That's the only real thing with it. Lastly, we have Salvage Operations. So Salvage Operations are an interesting type of mission. These are the ones where you have to find the mini mules, you have to repair them, and then you have to essentially set up a process to repair a damaged drop pod, so that way you can use that to go home. This is an interesting mission type because I like it and I don't like it at the same time, if that makes any sense. I think that the thematics and the entertainment of this mission is on point. I think that it's very cool to go through and salvage what was left by a fallen crew that came in before you. I think that that's a very cool feature. And I think that it is relatively fun to go find those mini mules, to set up the transmitter and all that kind of stuff. I think that it is very enjoyable, but I also think it's very drawn out. There are multiple times in this mission type where you just have to defend an area or just defend period for a set period of time. And at the end of these missions, it kind of feels like it drags on a little bit because there's that, I think, 2 or 3 minute section where the pod is just powering up, which I feel like they don't necessarily need that section. I feel like they can just tie that in while the pod is refueling, so that way it's just less downtime. I get why they do it. They could just make it a little bit less intrusive. In terms of classes, again, this is a mission type where a lot of people can shine very well. The scout can light up an area and can find the hard to reach mini mule legs. The driller can dig up the mule legs very easily or cut a path to them or carve an area out for the fuel cells when they come down. The gunner is in his element because he gets to defend a lot, he gets to kill things a lot, and the engineer gets to do engineer things. He gets to defend very well. He gets to set up platforms for the scout whenever he needs them. Everybody has a place in this particular mission type, and I do think that it is good. I just don't think that it's as good as I would want it to be. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in like the low B tier. I don't think it's I don't think it's not fun, but I do think it drags on a lot at the end, which I think is really the biggest thing that is holding this particular mission type back, is that it drags on just a little bit too long at the end. And there you have my tier listings on the mission types of Deep Rock Galactic. This one was a lot shorter than the last one was because there's significantly less to go through. And I hope I didn't make too many enemies. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you are satisfied with my placements on these particular mission types. Again, every single mission type in the game is fun, and everybody has their own opinion and views on what mission types are fun, which ones are not. This is just where I stand in my particular regards. And if you guys have any different opinions about any of these mission types, I'd love to hear about. I'm not sure what other tier list I'll do in the future because these were the three that kind of came to my mind the first, but if anybody has any ideas for any or wants to see any other kind of stuff like this in the future, let me know down below, and I would love to hear what you guys have to say. But anyway, I hope you guys found this video helpful. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like because it tells me what types of videos you guys want to see. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time for another video.